So if you remember, we bought this thing. This is an 06, and we bought it pretty cheap. These 05 to 09s are getting really cheap because they have the 4-valve, or the GoPro, stop recording. So if you remember, we bought this 06 back about, I don't know, 2 years ago. And hey, it was an awesome car then. We bought it because my 68 wasn't done yet, and I was sick and tired of missing out on all of the car stuff with all my buddies. So the plan was to buy this one. That'll kind of get us to the car shows, go to get ice cream, all that kind of stuff with my little guy. And then once my 68 was done, the plan was to sell it. Now, like I mentioned, a lot of people want to start buying the 11 and newer because it has the Coyote in it. But for us, that just meant that this car fit the bill even more. It was cheap enough that we could go ahead and buy it and use it for the time, and then once the 68 was done, we'd go ahead and sell it and get out of it. Let's go over all the parts that we put on it to get it to where it is today. So a lot of the changes that we started making to this car were to the front end. As you can see here, we have the carbon fiber hood. I did go ahead and place the vents in for this video. They are not fully installed yet, so in case you see a little bit of air under them or something, you'll kind of know why. So I figure we might as well start this review here at the front of the vehicle. And as you can see, we kept the stock GT grille and bumper assembly, but we did modify the lower grille here. We cut open this section here on both sides of the grille, and that's because I plan to make a 3D printed funnel that's going to direct all the air that comes into this scoop all the way over to the front brake, one on each side. And that's going to help us out on our track days so that we don't get brake fade by overheating the brakes. Next thing on the front end that we changed was this lower chin splitter here, or spoiler I should say. We had a cheap Amazon piece on here when we bought the car, but we did end up swapping it out for this FR500 piece here. So that is a part that's discontinued from Ford Performance, but we are lucky enough to find one. So I'm pretty happy to have it on here, as it's just going to be harder and harder to find those in the future. Lastly, for the front end, we have this massive splitter here. This was made out of aluminum by our friends over at Dynamic Laser. They also did all the bracketry that we needed to help put this thing on. So most splitters that you buy for this car stop right at the front wheel. But ours, we went all the way back to the back of the K-frame, which is pretty much the back of the engine. The reason we did that is because I wanted to try and force as much air into there as I could and force as much out of the hood as possible, which we'll get to in a second. So this piece not only mounts to the K-frame, it mounts in the middle, right around the radiator area, and then we built these big brackets that come off right about here for the bumper bolts. Right behind this plastic cover, there's a big steel structure, so if you get in an accident, we modified that so that we could attach to those bolts and come down and bolt right to this splitter. So this splitter is very sturdily attached. I mean, you can stand on it, and that's exactly what you want. There's a lot of cheaper splitters out there, but when you start getting wind force and downforce on it, they start to bow like this, which isn't doing you any good. You need that thing mounted pretty rigidly to the frame so that you're going to be able to pull the whole front end of the car down as you're creating that downforce. So I think this is a great look. It kind of keeps the stock feel of the car with this stock bumper, but I mean, if you look closer, you'll see that we added a lot of little touches to it that'll help make it work for us on the track. So we just talked about that splitter that's down on the front and how it's going to force air into the engine bay. If you don't have a way to get that air out of the engine bay, all you're doing is creating pressure underneath the hood, and that's actually going to lift the front end of the car up. That's not exactly what we want when we're on the track. We want to make this thing stick to the road as hard as we can. So we went ahead and got this carbon fiber hood, and we got a track spec hood vent kit, as you can see here. So what happens is the air comes in that's forced through on top of that splitter. It goes through the radiator, and then it comes out those grills. So those grills actually have a vacuum effect. As the air goes over top the hood like this, it sucks air from inside the hood, and it's going to suck the air out. That's where you get that vacuum effect, and that's how you can really start making downforce. Not only do they look super cool, but it is a functional piece, which is kind of what we're all about on this build. So now that you know everything about the front end, let's start diving into the suspension. So here we are, front passenger side of the vehicle, and I think the best place for us to start is on the inside. So we took the stock shocks and struts out of this thing. They had a lowering spring on them, but we pulled those out. They weren't going to be good for what we wanted. We reinstalled a set of KW V3 coilovers. Now, yes, these things are super expensive, but I can tell you it is the best riding coilover system that I've been in to date. Now, you know, most people that do a lowering spring or a coilover, the cars kind of ride really stiff. They just bounce around a lot and they're not really ideal. KW really went through and engineered this product so that, you know, even my wife can go ahead and get in the car with me and we can go driving around for a couple hours and she's not complaining about the rough ride. So thumbs up to those guys. And hey, like I said, they do cost a lot of money, but it was definitely worthwhile in my opinion. Moving out a little bit from that, we have the Phase 2 Motortrend outer tie rods. You guys watched us install those, I don't know, a couple months ago now. And all I can tell you is they are working phenomenally. I do love that it's a Heim joint on there and you really get rid of that little slop that you have in a ball joint like most vehicles have on the front end. By doing this, it gives you a little bit of adjustment there so you can help dial out some of that bump steer that you get. And because it's a Heim joint, it's really, as much as you put into that steering wheel, you know that's exactly how much that wheel is going to be turning. So I wouldn't change those for anything. Moving out a little bit more from that, we went and changed the stock flex lines here in the front for the brakes to a stainless braided line. Why might you do that, you might ask? Well, you do that because the stainless braided line doesn't go ahead and bulge like this when you push the brake pedal. Over time, the rubber that you have on a stock brake line gets soft. So the harder you push on that pedal, the more that line tries to expand and you don't really get a good feeling on your foot of how much pressure you're actually putting into those brakes. So we did those and then a massive set of these Stop Tech brakes. The brakes on this thing are absolutely huge. This is an 18-inch wheel and there is not much room around them. So that's about as small of a wheel as we can do on this brake package. And I can tell you, I obviously haven't been able to push it to its limit yet on the street, but I've been in other cars with this exact setup on there and it will blow you away with how good it handles. Moving out a little bit more from the brakes, we have these really nice 18-inch wheels. I love them. They're super light, and that gave us a spot that we could put our Federal 595 tires on. These tires are super soft. They're in a 200 tread wear class, and hey, for how cheap they are, I'm super impressed with how they work. You know, there's a ton of grip there when you want it, and you can still break them loose if you need to, as you'll see later in this video. So that's all for the front end. Let's start moving backward. So if you remember, I did not put a roll cage in this car, and that's because I do want to get my kids in and out of the back seat as easily as possible. Yes, it would be super nice. Yes, I really do want one, but the goal of this car was to have a really fun street car that I could take to the track and just enjoy. It wasn't to make a race car that I try to use on the street. So maybe when my kids are old enough and, you know, they don't want to drive around with me anymore, I'll throw a cage in it and really go after it. But until then, this is the way it's going to stay. Now, we did go ahead and add the gauges in the center, as you guys saw in a previous episode, and we did go ahead and add a radio. So those are two things that I really wanted. One, the radio has Bluetooth, so I can answer my phone and do all that kind of stuff on it. And then the gauges are going to tell us how much boost we're making, and also our air-fuel ratio. So those are two things that you're going to want to have if you have a supercharger on your car like we do. Now, other than that, what are we going to be doing to the interior? I do want to add a set of racing seats to it, but I need to find some that recline so I can recline them forward or lean them forward and get my kids in and out of the back seat as easily as possible. So I haven't found a set that, one, I'm in love with, and two, that, you know, fit in the budget for right now. So we have the stock seats in here, but hey, more to come. So here we are at the rear of the vehicle, and there is a ton going on back here. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen all the Mustangs crashing all over the internet, and 90% of them are this body style, right? Well, that's because all the rubber bushings back here that connect the rear end to the car are super soft. So as soon as you start getting into power or you try to fishtail around a corner or something along those lines, you never really can predict where this car is going to go. It's really hard to anticipate that, you know, it's going to grab on the right side, so steer that way a little bit. Phase 2 Motortrend was able to solve that problem. I went ahead and got their adjustable panhard bar, their adjustable lower control arms, and their adjustable upper control arm in this thing. That also is mounted to the anti-hop bracket, so that helps try to eliminate, the rear axle doing this as you get on power. And with the Phase 2 Motortrend parts, I was able to dial in exactly where I wanted that axle, left to right in the vehicle, forward and backward in the vehicle, and the exact pinion angle that I wanted. All of that matters when you're trying to go really fast on the track. I guess if you were driving around, just to get ice cream or whatever, you may not need some of those components. But if your stock components are already starting to wear out, hey, why not upgrade? Phase 2 Motortrend offers an awesome part for a great price, and they're really great to deal with. So if you need any of them, make sure you tell them 710 sent you. Now, aside from that, we did upgrade the rear sway bar in this car. A lot of guys take them right out. I like to feel with it in, so we left it in there. And brakes. We did stainless braided brake lines back here, the same as we did in the front, to try and eliminate some of that bulging in the stock flex line. Next thing we did was put reman stock rear calipers on this car. Why would we do stock if we have massive brakes in the front? Well, a company that I used to work for did a ton of engineering on this chassis Mustang, and they found that putting a massive brake kit back here didn't really add that much into the performance. So I opted to save some money and some weight by not having that rotational mass and go with this. So this is a stock replacement brake rotor from StopTech, so it matches the front, and then a stock replacement caliper on it. Again, if I'm at the track and something were to happen to my rear brakes, you can get these calipers for like 40 bucks, and I could throw a stock rotor on here from the local auto parts store that have them all in stock. So that seemed to make sense for me. Again, if I was strictly road racing, would I change this setup? Probably. But because I drive this thing on the street a lot and I go to the track every so often, this was the perfect setup for me, and I'm more than happy with it. So let's get to the part that everybody loves or everybody hates about this car, and that is this massive wing. So we went ahead and got a 69-inch wing on here, and it does sit about an inch taller than the roof of the car. I know a lot of people hate it. I'm not a Honda, blah, 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 blah. But there is actually a reason to have this wing, and that is to create downforce, pushing the rear end down into the ground and getting more traction around the track. Again, if I was doing some drag racing or half-mile top speed runs or something, yes, this is probably not the setup that you want. But to do road coursing and drive around and get awesome traction at the track doing tight turns, this is a good setup. Now, I did buy this wing from NRG. And a lot of the guys who run this style of wing, I should say, on these cars, they run an APR. The problem is that APR wing is like 3 times the amount of this one. I couldn't budget it, so this is what I got. Now, there are a couple things that I do not like about this wing that we need to address this winter, and I guess now is the right time to start talking about it. If you see these little side plates right here, these little winglets, they are super, super small in my opinion. A lot of the guys, like I said, who run this style wing on this car have massive side plates on these things. And I've tried, I made some with dynamic laser, and the problem is, let me spin you around. If you look at this, it doesn't sit straight to the body of the car. It also kicks out at the bottom. So not only is this not straight vertically, it's not straight to the car this way. And when I put my bigger side plate on here, it really, really accentuated how far off it was. So I have them cut already. I do want to put them on, but I couldn't this year because what I'm going to have to do is modify the end on both sides of the wing so I can bolt them on so those sit perfectly vertical and perfectly straight with the car. The next thing that I am not a super big fan of are these uprights right here. Now you do have a little bit of adjustment right here in the front, but it only gives you 3 locations: in middle, up, or down. And what I want to do is I want to be able to adjust this thing to get the exact attack angle that I want to increase as much downforce as I can, but not create a whole bunch of drag slowing the car down. So the only way I'm going to be able to accomplish that is remake those uprights. So I've already been in talks with Dynamic about doing it. I just have to come up with a design in CAD that I actually like and then have them cut it out for me. So those are going to be happening this winter. New winglets are going to be happening this winter, and I think that's about it for the part that 99% of the public actually hates about this car. Alright, so we've gone over the whole chassis and everything we got into this point. The difference is we haven't gone underneath the car. So what are some of the things we added under the car this year that weren't on it in the past? Yes, we did go through and fix the entire exhaust system. We added a engine torque limiter setup, which stops the engine from rocking left to right. That's important in these cars because the shifter actually hangs off the back of the transmission. So if you take a rubber engine mount, a rubber transmission mount, and now you rubber mount the shifter way behind that, all of the compliance and all of those bushings put together sometimes stop you from getting it into gear way higher up in the RPM range. So by putting those engine limiters on here, you can actually stop the engine from moving drastically, and that also helps throw that thing into gear higher up in that torque range. So we did it for that. We also have an aluminum drive shaft, and because we're on the track and I don't want to break it, we put a drive shaft safety loop in there. Basically what that is a hoop that goes around the front end of the drive shaft. So if you were to break that drive shaft, that hoop catches it, doesn't let it fall down and dig into the ground, potentially pogoing your car over. So we did that, and last but not least, we did a supercharger kit. Obviously, there's a lot of videos on it. So we have the TVS 2300 on here. This is a Gen 1 on the car right now, but I do have a Gen 2R sitting. Again, I didn't want to take a car apart this summer. We were having way too much fun driving it. So we're going to put the Gen 2R on it this winter, which will probably require a retune because of all of the added airflow. So we will address that at the same time. Now, that's been through the whole entire car. You know where we started, you know where we're at now. Let's get to all the things we're gonna change this winter. So here we are, obviously in the middle of the car. And what we're gonna be doing this winter is wrapping the roof of this thing to match the carbon fiber components that we have on here. Obviously we have the hood and the spoiler. The trunk that's on here right now is just a spare one that I bought and I wrapped it carbon fiber. We're gonna do the same thing on the roof. I would like to change the trunk lid out for a real carbon piece. The problem is it wasn't in my budget this year. We'll have to see what the winter brings. Maybe it'll be in the budget for next summer. But if not, I still think that it looks awesome. And having the whole center of the car, that dark carbon look, I think is gonna really kick it off one more notch. Lastly, let me take the camera here. The last thing back here I think that I want to change is in between the tail lights. I don't have any panel or anything there right now, but I do have the FR500 piece to match that front spoiler that we have. And it is like a finned piece that goes right across the back. I would like to install that again as a discontinued part. I think it'd be pretty cool to have it on the car. So I would like to get that thing in place this year. So maybe this winter we'll work on doing that. But other than that, I think the outside is pretty much done for all the big heavy components. All right, so a couple more things I want to do this winter. We have those logos on the quarter windows there. My kid likes the look of them, but he can't see out as we're driving around, so he's always yelling at me that he can't see out. So what we're gonna do is take that exact logo and move it down onto the door. I wanna put a big, massive 710 logo on the door so it looks like a real road racing car. You know how race cars always have that big number on the door? We're gonna run that down underneath. That'll open up the quarter window for him, and it'll kinda add to the look that we're going after. The last thing I think on the to-do list, and the biggest item on the to-do list for this winter, is I want to change out that clutch. So the clutch in the car right now is just a stock unit, and it is working, but it could always be better. So what we did was we went and got a Spec Stage 2 and their lightweight flywheel. So we're gonna end up pulling the trans out of this thing. We'll put the clutch and the flywheel in, and just to add to that a little bit more, we went and got a stainless braided line that goes from the master cylinder up at the top all the way down to the slave cylinder at the bottom. So hopefully we don't get that bulge, the same thing as the brake lines, in that clutch pedal. So we'll be doing all that this winter, and I think that's about it. So make sure you stay tuned for those videos, and yeah, we're gonna get these parts on here, so next year this car will be even better, and hopefully we can get out to the track with it. All right, so we went through where we started, where we're at today, and where we're trying to go in the future. Now, all of the components on this car are working well, but I would like to say one thing. The Phase 2 Motortrend suspension components that are on this thing not only look brand new, I crawled underneath right before making this video, and none of the powder coat is chipped, nicked, nothing. It looks literally like I took it out of the box 25 minutes ago. So, all those components still look real good. They're performing great. I do love the added feel that you get from having a Heim joint there instead of all those rubber bushings. And hey, if you're looking to replace stuff on your car, I highly recommend their products. So go over to Phase 2 Motortrend and tell them 710 sent you. Now, there's one last thing I'd like to get to, and usually that is, hey, thanks for getting this far in the video, blah, 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 blah. But we're not gonna do that. What I'd like to say is, I have one little extra thing for all you people that got this far, and that is, in my opinion, a great burnout. Everybody loves burnouts, so we were lucky enough to go to a closed course that my buddy owns, and we were able to do it. So, let's get this video done. You can watch the burnout, and I'll catch you next week for the next video. See you Tuesday. Make sure you do stuff. See ya.